Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to get started here. I'm Edwin Walker. I'm the acting administrator and acting assistant secretary at the Administration for Community Living. I'm so pleased that you all got in the room. We understand there's a very special guest in the building upstairs, and so a person who's talking to FEMA today. And as a result, the building is now locked down. So we don't expect others to be able to get in or anyone to get out for a little while. And as a result, they've also locked down communication. So your Wi-Fi probably is not going to work. And we also understand that our live streaming probably will not work. But we are sending out a notice to the network, those who registered in advance for the live stream, that we will be recording this and posting it online as soon as the event is over. Again, I really want to welcome each of you for participating and for being here, for joining us this morning. I definitely want to welcome my colleague members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. Thank you for being here. And we're just really excited. We're excited about the continued interest in how we as the federal government can continue to address the issues of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and the broader issues of elder justice. And I personally am so proud of the accomplishments of each of the agencies represented here today. And you know, many of the meetings have been built around what we can do at the federal level. That's what the statute required us to do in terms of coordination among federal agencies. But today's agenda, we built it a little differently than the others. In the previous meetings, the council was focused on identifying gaps and target areas for the federal government to address. As we approach an upcoming and significant transition within the federal government, we really thought that it was important for the Elder Justice Coordinating Council to really do what we refer to as a check-in meeting that would allow us to reflect on what we've done over the past few years, to think about whether we are still on target, and to give forethought to the future. Today, we will hear from the Elder Justice Coordinating Council members who are present. We will have them provide brief highlights of their agency's accomplishments, and then we will turn to two panels of speakers to share with us examples of how the work of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council has had a positive impact on communities. But before we begin, in terms of recognizing all of the other members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, I'd like to kick it off with a few highlights from the Administration for Community Living. We have been engaged in a number of key activities at the national, state, and local levels to promote and support a very robust, evidence-based, and national infrastructure of elder justice, one that is designed to really mitigate and address all types of adult maltreatment and to provide very strong leadership, which is something the GAO called for. At the Administration for Community Living, we really envision a comprehensive, multidisciplinary system that very effectively supports older adults and people with disabilities so that they can really exercise their right to live where they choose, with the people they choose, and to fully participate in communities. And to do so without even the threat of abuse, neglect, self-neglect, or financial exploitation. We really view adult protective service agencies as a very critical and very important component of this comprehensive system to address adult maltreatment, and strong federal leadership in this area really must include a commitment to enhancing the adult protective services system in responding to victims. Several building blocks are really needed in order to develop an effective network of adult protective services systems across our country, and I'd like to highlight a few of those today. The first is a national APS data collection system. The second is funding to support enhancements to APS. The third is research to further our knowledge about what really works. And the fourth is the development of national guidance for adult protective services. And we've worked on each of these areas. We know that we really must expand our knowledge about the scope of elder abuse so that we can really assess how we can most effectively address it. And specifically, we know that GAO has cited the absence of data for research and best practices as a significant barrier to improving adult protective services programs. As we've reported in the past, the Administration for Community Living has undertaken the development of the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, or that which we refer to as NAMERS. It will be the first comprehensive national reporting system for APS programs, and it will focus on collecting data in a consistent and a regular manner. I'm really pleased to announce that we are in the usability testing phase now, and we plan to go live by January and to have the first reports from NAMERS reported to us by June of next year. We believe this truly is an example of how important this information is to the states as of September 16th, we had 49 of 57 jurisdictions, being states, territories, and the District of Columbia, who had committed to participating in NAMERS in the first year. And the rest are still determining in what capacity they would like to participate. All of the jurisdictions are doing so voluntarily. NAMERS is not a mandated system. So we really think this is an incredible depiction of why such data collection is needed. And we heard directly from so many APS administrators that they've been really starving and waiting for this type of federal leadership. They know that by providing this data, we will collectively be in a much better position to really tell the story, to review and to analyze and to evaluate what is going on, and then to put forward best practices. And in support of that, we've been able to provide funding to about half of those states who are focused on providing us data. With this information that's going to be obtained from APS on the investigations they conduct, we will build a very robust data collection system, a set of information about the victims of abuse and the perpetrators that will be used to better evaluate both prevention and intervention efforts. Last year, the Administration for Community Living initiated a grant program to help address the gaps and challenges in state APS systems. The program provides funding to states to enhance APS systems statewide, including innovations and improvements in practice, services, data collection, and reporting of all systems. The anticipated long-term impact of this program is really to improve the experiences, health, well-being, and outcomes of individuals serviced by APS, and to document improvements accurately and in a manner that is consistent with our national data collection effort. In 2015, we issued $3 million in competitive grants to states, and then in 2016, we issued another $2.5 million. And with this funding, we're supporting 23 states in improving their APS programs and their data collection efforts. This is the first federal discretionary funding opportunity that was specifically targeted for adult protective services, and we believe this is really a historic development. Now, I know that we're all familiar with how little is known about risk and protective factors for being a victim or perpetrator of abuse, and about effective and evidence-based preventions and interventions. In FY 2016, ACL established the Elder Justice Innovation Grants. And this program was designed to support the development and the advancement of solutions to new and emerging issues related to elder abuse and elder justice. The ultimate goal of the program and of the grants is really to create credible benchmarks for elder maltreatment, prevention and control, and for program development and evaluation. We've awarded $3.4 million in competitive grants to contribute to the evidence-based knowledge and to create materials and programs that can be replicated or disseminated. And we've done that in 4 areas: elder abuse forensic centers, addressing abuse in guardianship, understanding self-neglect, and addressing abuse in Indian country. We know that this is a major investment in research and that these grantees are going to receive most of them will receive nearly $1 million over a 2-year period in federal funding, with the hope of enabling significant advancements in knowledge. We're also demonstrating leadership for APS by facilitating the development of the first national set of guidelines for state APS administrative systems. The guidelines are designed to enhance APS practice, increase consistency across, and provide more uniformity to state and local APS systems. The guidelines do not encourage consistency for consistency's sake, but are really designed to lead to the improvement in outcomes for the system. The guidelines build upon the work that's already been conducted, and they're based on the best science available on what works in APS agencies and other similar agencies. They are field-driven and consensus-based. They represent the input of federal staff, of 2 expert working groups comprised of outside experts, some who are in the room today, and hundreds of comments that were submitted from around the country. We believe that there are several ways that states may choose to utilize the guidelines, including as a model of comparison to their own system, to identify new areas of interest, and to identify areas for improvement in their own state statutes or policies. Today, I'm very, very pleased to announce, and I have to thank all who were involved, including and especially the staff. I'm very pleased to announce that the very long-awaited product is now available on the ACL website. And over the next year, we will be conducting outreach to inform state APS agencies about the guidelines, how they can use the guidelines. And so please stay tuned for more opportunities to learn about these guidelines. As many of you know, and as I mentioned, we in the federal government are in the midst of the process of developing transition materials for the new incoming administration. And as is evidenced by me chairing this meeting today, some of our biggest advocates in federal government have departed, namely Kathy Greenlee, and others will be departing over the next few months. But I want you all to really recognize something that is fundamentally important, and that's the attention of the federal government with regard to elder justice issues is not dependent solely on one or a few charismatic and passionate leaders. As you see here today, there remains in each of our agencies leaders and staff who are so very committed to the issues of elder justice and who are continuing to advance this work. As I think about it, we rarely encounter outright opposition when we talk about the need to end elder abuse. Rather, what we encounter is a sense of people feeling overwhelmed or not knowing exactly what to do or what the first steps should be. And that the issues are so insurmountably large. I can remember Kathy Greenlee engaging with some national aging organizations, and one leader who we all respect said, "I just don't know how we can tackle this issue. It's just so large. I don't know where to start." And we heard that repeatedly. But, we have years of of experience under our belts, years of effort, years of accomplishments now, that will shorten that learning curve for the new administration and the new leaders who will be coming in. We have this body, the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. We have a set of 8 recommendations developed by this council for prioritizing the areas for federal involvement. We have the Elder Justice Roadmap to identify policy, research, and program priorities. We have a number of federal entities targeted specifically on elder justice that didn't really exist during the last transition, such as ACL's Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services, such as the CFPB's Office on Older Adults or Older Americans, and the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative. For all of these initiatives and activities, we're really grateful, but it points to the significance of this issue and a commitment to continuing regardless of who is in the chair of this council or in the chairs of our agencies. And so I know I speak for every one of our member agencies in, again, welcoming you here today, welcoming our speakers, for helping us to reflect on what we've accomplished these past few years, and for the upcoming discussion with regard to our future and the next steps in this process. So with that, I'd like to pause and then to turn to each of our agencies with regard to a few opening remarks, comments about what they have accomplished, things they would want you to know, and how we can continue to collaborate. And the first speaker that I would turn to is the other agency, which is the named entity in the statute, the Department of Justice. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Joyce Branda, who is the Deputy Assistant AG for the Civil Division. And Joyce, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I am very happy to be representing the Attorney General at this meeting for the second year in a row. And before I started, I just wanted to thank Edwin for, first of all, those very, very lovely remarks, and particularly your last remarks about the commitment of all of us on this issue. I think that we can all agree that there's a commitment, and as a career attorney who's been in the department for many, many administrations, I can tell you that my personal commitment is very, very strong on this issue, having a 97-year-old mom and seeing day to day what her life is like and how we could thinking about how to improve it. So thank you for this, and thank you for organizing this session and the previous meetings as well. I know it takes a lot of work and effort to do that, and we do appreciate it at the department that ACL has taken the laboring oar on this. And I wanted to acknowledge some of the folks from the department, I think many of whom are here today, for their work on the Elder Justice Initiative and pushing that initiative forward, and in our cooperative efforts with the folks represented here. Andy Mao, Susan Lynch, Rich Goldberg, who you will hear from later this morning, as well as Julie Childs, Maria Shumar, Shelley Jackson, Jamie Davis, and Sid Stahl. So thank you to all of you for your commitment. It's been almost 4 years, sort of amazing, since Secretary Sebelius and Attorney General Eric Holder convened the inaugural meeting of this council. At that meeting, Secretary Sebelius talked about how every senior citizen should have the chance to live their later years with basic comfort and financial security. Attorney General Holder, in turn, emphasized the critical need for greater collaboration and communication to advance our collective efforts to combat elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. I'm happy to say that since that meeting, there's been a significant increase in the level of coordination and collaboration among the federal agencies, as will be highlighted later this morning. Importantly, the Council has taken a number of major steps on the 8 recommendations that Edwin referred to both improve our response to awareness of and prevention of elder abuse and financial exploitation. And I just wanted to highlight some of the steps that the Department of Justice has taken for all of you. In response to the recommendation to support the investigation and prosecution of elder abuse cases, the department launched 10 regional elder justice task forces in March of this year. These task forces will bring together federal, state, and local stakeholders to focus on those nursing homes that are providing grossly substandard care to their residents, as well as to combat elder financial exploitation. Moreover, to support the state and local prosecutors, the department has developed a video series on elder abuse prosecutions that's now available on the Elder Justice website that the department maintains, as well as YouTube. Working with national experts, this series provides critical information to prosecutors regarding every stage of a prosecution, whether it's from triaging and investigating the allegations, to working with experts and other partners, and to trial considerations. Supporting elder justice abuse research is another place where the department has made a lot of progress. In response to the council's recommendation to develop an elder justice research agenda, the department has funded the survey of 26 elder abuse research leaders nationwide to prioritize the most critical knowledge gaps in the elder abuse field. Not surprisingly, the survey prioritized the need for greater research on effective strategies to prevent elder abuse and financial exploitation. So given that, the department's National Institute of Justice put out a solicitation in February of 2016 for the initial planning phase for the development of an effective intervention that can be used to prevent elder abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of at-risk seniors living in the community setting. The solicitation builds in part on previous efforts, like the Administration on Aging's Elder Abuse Prevention Intervention Demonstration Projects. I'm excited to say there were a number of terrific proposals that came back, and we recently made 2 grants under the solicitation to the University of Southern California and the Urban Institute. This is just the beginning of the first phase of a multi-year process. But we believe both projects have great promise and hope they will advance materially our elder abuse prevention efforts. The department has also actively engaged the capacity of frontline responders to elder abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation by supporting the development of training and other resources. The department's initiated projects to support the development of training for law enforcement and prosecutors, to civil legal aid attorneys, to guardians and conservators, and for victim specialists to multidisciplinary teams. Likewise, the department is simultaneously supporting the development of tools for these responders, such as an elder abuse app for law enforcement to use on their smartphones, and a documentation protocol for healthcare providers to properly document potential incidents of elder abuse. Again, we expect all of these projects to significantly bolster our collective ability to respond to elder abuse. Last, I just wanted to put in a plug and a pitch for the department's Elder Justice website, as it cuts across many of the recommendations that were set forth by this council. The website is at www.elderjustice.gov, and it was recently relaunched and contains even more information for victims and their families, prosecutors, law enforcement, victim specialists, and others. I went on it the last couple of days, and it is really a fabulous resource. It's very user-friendly, and a very clear, I think, and accessible tool for everyone. While there are many new facets to the website, the one I wanted to highlight was, as Edwin mentioned, the Elder Abuse Resource Roadmap, and that's accessible through the financial exploitation section of the website. It's easy to use. It can help direct users to all available federal resources and information, or to the appropriate federal agency where the user can report the incident of a potential elder financial scam or fraud. The resource map can, for example, direct users regarding a wide array of scams such as identity theft, consumer fraud, IRS tax, or impersonation scams. Finally, while the resource map currently focuses on elder financial exploitation, we've already begun to consider how to build it out regarding other forms of elder abuse as well, so be on the lookout for that as well. The department's been honored to work with our colleagues across the federal government to advance our collective efforts to combat elder abuse and financial exploitation. While we're pleased with the progress that we have made, there remains much to do, and we look forward to working with you in collaboration for the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And
we will attest to all of the initiatives, all of the components, and we actually love the relaunched website. It's great. So, next, I'd like to introduce Ben Belden, who is the Senior Advisor to the Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, and he's going to bring greetings from the Acting Commissioner.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you. Since I'm going to be speaking on the panel after this, I'm not going to double dip and take two time slots.
Thank you.
But I do just want to make sure that you all know that our agency and our acting commissioner is absolutely committed to this cause. We are not only a benefits administration agency, but under the leadership of our acting commissioner and our chief of staff, and with our consultations and collaborations with the EJCC, we've become much more concerned about and aware of the needs of our beneficiaries, their health, safety, and well-being. So I'm going to be speaking a little more about that on the panel, but I'm not going to double dip, so I'm going to yield the time to my next panelist.
Thank you, Ben. And please give Commissioner Colvin our best.
Absolutely.
Next, I would like to introduce the U.S. Postal Inspector's Office Deputy Chief Inspector, Gary Barksdale.
Thank you. As you said, my name is Gary Barksdale. I'm the Deputy Chief Postal Inspector for the United States Postal Inspection Service. Very pleased to be here today and participate with this panel. I actually consider it an honor to represent our agency and our commitment to this cause. I'm particularly happy today to talk about one case in particular. When it comes to mail fraud in general, we don't always get the big fish, but today I'm happy to highlight just a little bit, and I won't go into too much detail because I'll defer to our partner at DOJ, Mr. Goldberg, to talk about the case. It is an ongoing investigation, but I'll call your attention to 2 weeks ago, Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced a crackdown on a global fraud ring that raked in millions. Most of the victims, as you might guess, were our most vulnerable, the elderly. One victim in particular, a 91-year-old widow, actually sent over 700 checks to the phony charities and lotteries before her family realized what was going on. Just a few details about this particular ring. It was a complete ring. They actually had a professional writer. As you know, the professional writer, that's the person that crafts the pitch lines that are sent out to the victims. And if you've ever received one of these, they're very convincing. I mean, they clearly state you have won, you're the winner, and that's in some large prize. There was a list broker involved. You know anything about a list broker? That's the person that collects the names and address of consumers who routinely respond to sweepstake offers. And the more a person responds to phony charities or lotteries and sweeps, the more valuable their name and address becomes to these list brokers. And then one of the most critical parts to any mass marketing scheme is how they get their money. Right? So in this case, actually involved payment processors that actually help launder the money to take millions and millions of victim payments and get those funds almost unnoticed into U.S. financial systems. And in general, I really don't always know what prompts a person to send that first check to a foreign lottery, whether it's dementia, whether it's aging, or whether it's just they truly believe they're helping a family member. What I do know, when a family discovers that a loved one has been targeted by scammers, this event is horrific. Postal inspectors continue to investigate these type of cases. In this particular case, we have made several arrests and stopped this particular network with the help of our partners, many of which are with us here today, the U.S. Treasury. We're frozen assets domestically and abroad. We'll continue to work with the FTC, DOJ, U.S. Treasury, and even Dutch authorities to take down global networks. The inspection service will continue to promote tools and services to help families figure out as quickly as possible when mom and dad start to have trouble telling the difference between a legitimate offer and a fake one. We've devoted as an agency considerable resources to educating the public on ways to identify and avoid scams like these. And in a few minutes before Mr. Goldberg speaks, you'll actually see a very short press clip that we produced to draw the public's attention not only to the recent enforcement action, but to how it relates to elder fraud and mass marketing. These interviews, I think you will enjoy it, contain actual interviews of victims. So it's one thing for me to get up and talk about what a tragedy it is, but when you see an actual victim testimony of how they were duped by these scammers, I think it's very compelling. In addition to that, I'd like to invite you to visit one of our websites where you'll find some other prevention materials, deliveringtrust.com. As an agency, as much as myself or any of our agents would love to go out and make arrests. We believe that early prevention and detection is a key to help solving this problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary, and we really look forward to the video. I haven't seen it yet, but I've talked to others who have, and so we're going to be showing the video just prior to the panel, and I encourage everyone to watch very carefully because it highlights, I understand, some of the key mass mailing fraud efforts that are very common in this country. So thank you, and thank you for your efforts. Next, we're going to hear from Stacy Cannon, who is the Assistant Director for the Office for Older Americans within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Stacy.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today to share with you some of the recent CFPB accomplishments aimed at preventing and responding to elder financial exploitation led by our Office for Older Americans. These initiatives primarily fall under this council's Recommendation 7 on combating elder financial exploitation, but also Recommendation 2 on enhancing victim services, Recommendation 4 on research, and Recommendation 6 on training. In March of this year, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued an advisory for financial institutions focusing on financial abuse, since banks and credit unions are often well situated to protect their older account holders. With the advisory, we provided broad recommendations to help banks and credit unions prevent and respond quickly to suspected incidences of elder financial exploitation. This is the first time a federal regulator has provided an extensive set of best practices to help financial institutions fight this pervasive and often devastating problem. Since releasing the advisory, we have seen strong interest among financial institutions in the recommendations. For example, in May of this year, we held a webinar with nearly 1,000 attendees from financial institutions who were interested in learning more about the recommendations. In response to elder financial exploitation, the epidemic of exploitation cases, hundreds of communities across the United States have created collaborative networks to protect their older residents. To increase our understanding of how elder financial protection networks can grow and endure, the CFPB conducted national research. In August, we issued a report with recommendations to help community stakeholders develop or enhance their protection efforts. A companion resource guide was also released with the report, including promising practices, sample documents, and other helpful materials to bolster these interdisciplinary community efforts. We invite everyone who's listening today to join us in our effort in helping to build networks nationwide, especially in areas where no network exists, and to enhance those that are currently operating. To reach older adults in their homes and communities with fraud prevention messages, we're working with Meals on Wheels America and other groups to distribute plain language placemats on meal trays. To date, our placemats have raised awareness among hundreds of thousands of older Americans with leading messages such as "You have the right to be free from scams" and that mail fraud letters look real but promises are fake. Finally, our existing initiatives are going strong. We have disseminated nearly 1 million Managing Someone Else's Money guides for financial caregivers and are about to release an update of the Money Smart for Older Adults in coordination with the FDIC. Working with our partners on the Elder Justice Coordinating Council has strengthened our efforts, as well as I know all of our agencies' initiatives to enhance economic security for older people. We value our participation in the council and look forward to continued collaboration.
Thank you, Stacy. And I can attest that the materials you all put out have been incredibly helpful. We hear from folks all the time, and they love the placemats, by the way. Next, we will hear from our representative from the Federal Trade Commission, Lois Greisman, who is the Associate Director of the Division of Marketing Practices. Lois.
Thank you, Edwin. Good morning, everybody. I'm really honored to be here and to sit up here in the company of so many esteemed colleagues. It's a privilege. So the Federal Trade Commission focuses on combating elder fraud and abuse through law enforcement, education, and outreach. Law enforcement includes both hardcore frauds and ones involving otherwise, what I'd call otherwise legitimate products whose advertising crosses the line and is illegal. So as part of the hardcore fraud program, we were part of the international crackdown on mail fraud that Gary spoke of, and that Rich Goldberg will discuss in a bit, in which he played a truly brilliant role. The FTC, for its part, charged the operators of one particular fake prize promotion scheme. It mailed these phony prize certificates that Gary referred to, duping people into thinking they'd won $1 million and just had to pay $25 for some sort of processing or handling fee to collect the prize. Of course, those who paid received absolutely nothing. The defendants targeted literally hundreds of thousands of older consumers. They have a tremendously rich, what is in effect a sucker list. Turning to the non-hardcore fraud, we look primarily at claims for healthcare products and services that prey upon older persons' fears about age-related conditions such as dementia and Alzheimer's. So you've probably heard of Lumosity, the brain training program. The creators of it agreed to settle FTC charges alleging that they made various unfounded claims that Lumosity games could help users perform better at school, better at work, reduce or delay cognitive impairment associated with age. As part of that settlement, they agreed to pay $2 million in redress and notify subscribers of the FTC's action. Similarly, FTC entered into a settlement with another developer called Learning RX, also a brain training program that agreed to make allegedly false and unsubstantiated claims and pay $200,000 as part of a settlement. Law enforcement is just part of it. Consumer outreach, education, networking is a huge part of what we do. I hope each of you is familiar with really our signature education piece, Pass It On, which is aimed at active older consumers. We've added to Pass It On videos and tip sheets about various imposter scams, such as romance scams, the family emergency scams, technical support scams. What by that I mean, hi, the call comes in, hi, I'm from Microsoft, your computer's infected. If you'll just allow me to remotely access it, I can assist you. And if you don't, you may lose all of your data. I wonder if there's anyone in this room who has not received such a call, or who has not received a call from the IRS saying you owe taxes. And if you do not pay, the consequences will be dire. These are all imposter frauds. And our concern, obviously, is that they disproportionately target and may disproportionately affect older consumers. FTC also, of course, joined joined DOJ the other week in mail fraud consumer education campaign. Finally, I'd like you to mark your calendars. On December 6th, the FTC is going to be hosting a workshop on the changing consumer demographics in the country and how they affect all of our work, both in terms of law enforcement and consumer outreach and education. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lois. And we would love to get additional information about your workshop so that we can publicize it as well.
Sure.
And thank you for all of the information you put out to combat these scams. We really appreciate that. Next, we're going to turn to the Department of Treasury. And for us today, we have Louisa Quitman. And she's going to talk a little bit about financial intelligence and the degree to which we've been working collaboratively.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Louisa Quitman. I'm the Director for Financial Security at the Department of the Treasury, and I'm glad to be here representing the department and Secretary Liu. We're very pleased to be working with our colleagues across the Elder Justice Coordinating Council to make real progress toward fulfilling the objective, particularly described in the 8 recommendations, and some work being done to further Recommendation 1, support the investigation and prosecution of elder abuse cases. As you all are aware, seniors remain vulnerable to financial exploitation. To help address this problem, the Department of Treasury is working with our colleagues at the CFPB and at Health and Human Services to collate resources and develop best practices to support key stakeholders, such as law enforcement, adult protective services, and the financial sector. Although there's been good progress on this front so far, which we've heard about at the last meeting, we need to do more to build relationships and encourage collaborations that help detect and prevent financial crimes against elders. It is our hope that with clearer guidance, greater focus on the financial aspects of this crime, we will be able to energize and empower stakeholders and foster clearer communication and deeper partnerships. So this is still a work in progress, but we hope to be able to share it with this group in the months ahead. I also want to take a moment to speak about some of the work we have done at the Department of Treasury to foster financial security and to look ahead at what more we can do to build financial security and resilience so that more people are heading into their old age better prepared to be financially strong and secure and less likely to be financially exploited. In the last century or so, our society has made great progress in providing pathways to financial security for many Americans. A growing economy has served as the primary driver, but also protections like deposit insurance for bank accounts and oversight of the financial sector have contributed to shared growth, as have had opportunities for more people to participate in the economy by removing barriers to education, jobs, and home ownership. And we've built safety nets, certainly like Social Security, to ensure protection of those at more vulnerable times. Yet I think we're all aware that recent decades have seen slowing and even reversals of the trend toward shared prosperity. Many workers have seen stagnation and decline in their incomes, increasing costs and necessities like housing, transportation, and healthcare, and barriers to economic opportunities like the high cost of higher education. And these trends seem to be having a real impact on financial security across many American sectors, but with disproportionate effects on younger people, young people who are young adults right now, but will be elders someday, and across minority populations. It's very clear that too many Americans across the lifespan are lacking financial security, and especially as they do so heading into older age. So a recent Federal Reserve study found that nearly a third of Americans define themselves as either struggling to get by or just getting by. And another study found that 2 in 5 American adults have figured out what they need to save for retirement, and 56% of working age people reported that they were worried about running out of money in retirement. So we're concerned about elder Americans now, but I think this is something we should be concerned about for the long time to come. This lack of financial security stands to exacerbate existing disparities that we're already seeing in health and longevity. It creates more challenges for the most vulnerable populations, increases dependence on safety nets, and runs the risk of impairing opportunities for future generations. So I think, Edwin, we do not have to worry about running out of work to do in this council. We certainly need to deepen our understanding of trends to provide insights into the actions we can take. We're very excited to hear about this new event coming out of the Federal Trade Commission and certainly the research at the Department of Justice and others. And I think this research is important to inform policymakers, to inform service providers at the state and local level, as well as inform the private sector in terms of products and services that can better meet the needs of families. Certainly, government can play a number of important roles to bring about improvements in Americans' financial security, whether that's ensuring protections from harmful or abusive financial products. I know Stacy's got that covered. Promoting financial capability across a lifetime, and many of you also serve on the Financial Literacy and Education Commission focused on that. Bridging the market to provide starter savings products like we at Treasury have done with the MyRA product. And then investing in research is certainly a priority for many of us across the government. We were very pleased to work with Social Security earlier this year on just that topic. So I look forward to hearing from our colleagues in government and practitioners in the field and the work that they're doing to address elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. But I hope we can also think ahead and think about how we're building financial security and resilience into our work in this area. I look forward to the conversation today and also in the months ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. That's great. And we so enjoy the partnership with you and with others here at the table. Next, we will hear from the Chief Counsel for the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy with the Securities and Exchange Commission, Owen Donnelly.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Simply stated, this continues to be an incredibly important mission for not just the commission, but the staff and the chair. And that importance is reflected in almost all our major program areas. I'll talk very briefly about three. First, one of the functions of the SEC is to examine regulated entities, including broker-dealers, advisors, and other financial service companies. We have two high-priority initiatives in the last 2 years in this space. One was the National Senior Investor Initiative, which we conducted with our colleagues at FINRA, the self-regulatory organization for brokers. We focused on issues such as designations of senior specialists and in my point of view, very important suitability issues. Lois mentioned the difference between hardcore fraud and other disclosure issues. The damage done via older investors buying unsuitable products with high fees is a real problem and something that we continue to focus on. And then relatedly, in June of last year, we launched a multi-year examination initiative on retirement issues, comparable focus, but I think the main point of this is this continues to be ongoing now. These aren't one-off initiatives. This is something we do year in, year out in all focus, especially the exam space. We also bring cases. I know we're sort of short on time. I won't go through them, but we bring hundreds of cases every year. Many, if not most, involve senior victims, often target affinity frauds. Those are frauds that target particular groups, often involve older Americans. We continue to bring cases every year in that space. And then finally, in the outreach and education space, where I come from, we attack this program on a number of fronts, often in conjunction with our colleagues in the federal government and others. We maintain a website and disseminate a great deal of content. The website's investor.gov. There's a large focus on fraud against seniors. We distributed hundreds of thousands of our senior guide, which is essentially red flags of fraud targeting seniors. This is we have long form content. We push out short form bulletins, for example, top 5 ways to avoid fraud. We push these out increasingly using social and digital channels, which we are finding are more effective even in this space. But we also, we do a ton of in-person events. I think we did 75 fiscal year 15, our last fiscal year wrapped. I think it'll be more like 100. We go to places like senior centers, to public libraries, often in partnerships with APS or with other federal agencies or state agencies, and actually just put on conversations with older Americans. And while it's hard to scale that up, I think those actually make a real big difference too. So that's a brief overview of where we are. It's an honor to be here, and very much look forward to learning and hearing from everyone else the rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Owen. Next, we're going to hear from a representative of the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Director of Pension and Fiduciary Service, Ms. Cheryl Rawls.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Secretary Walker, it is my pleasure to be here, and I thank you for convening this meeting. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Secretary McDonald and the Department of Veterans Affairs. I will tell you I am a veteran, and sitting here, I couldn't help think, put me in, Coach. This is my first meeting, and anything that you guys can do to help me convince my parents that I'm smarter, I will take it and run with it, for sure. You guys may not know, but of the 22 million veterans that we have living today, almost 46% of them are over 65, and they rely on VA as well for their benefits and services. So protecting them is one of the promises that we made when they actually put that uniform on. Today, I'm just going to talk about one particular program that we have made some strides in that are connected to what this council has been working on. We hear a lot about VHA, Veterans Health. We hear a lot about compensation, but from the aspect of pension, helping those veterans who are living right below the poverty line. And today I'm going to talk about what we're doing for our most special veterans, our veterans that aren't able to manage their finances and they need some assistance. And so in a lot of cases, we provide fiduciary services. And in 2016, we actually doled out about $3 billion to a little less than 200,000 veterans over the course of the year. The average age of these veterans in this program is 77 years old, and over close to 60% of them are near 80 years old. So we've done some things internally and externally. First, one of the things, we had to take a look at our regulations to make sure that they were clean and able to be administered throughout the nation. The second thing, as we've been talking about here, we started to collaborate with a number of our colleagues, particularly Social Security Administration, with the OIG fraud hotline and fiduciary misuse. We've kind of put that in place, and we've been participating in the red flag expert panels. Internally, we needed to kind of revamp our training for our employees that were going out there to work with these veterans and their family members, helping to explain to them why they needed someone to be able to take care of their finances, and they were not able to do that. But externally, we had to provide guidebooks and toolkits for those fiduciaries, and then make sure that we had the checks and balances in place so we knew that our veterans were not being taken advantage of. I will tell you, we still have a lot of work to do, as many others have already noted here on this council. It's wonderful to be able to glean lots of different perspectives, to be able to put things in place. And this fiduciary program is just one way that we're continuing to look after our aging population. I appreciate the time the council has allotted me, and I'm looking forward to continuing our partnership.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for joining us. You are more than welcome all the time, okay? Next, we will hear from the representative of the Corporation for National and Community Service, Michael Harrington, who's the Acting Director of Senior Corps. Mike.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here to represent the Corporation for National and Community Service, or CNCS for short. I really want to take the opportunity to talk about how important national service and volunteerism can be in addressing elder justice issues. We have in the corporation literally hundreds of thousands of national service participants and volunteers. One of our strategic initiatives is Healthy Futures, which includes independent living or safe and secure living for seniors. At CNCS, we know that the engagement of volunteers and national service is an innovative and cost-effective strategy for addressing a wide array of issues, including elder justice issues. As a tool, volunteerism is widely available to agencies, public and federal, at all agencies, as an affordable source of human capital to help agencies and organizations to carry out their missions. We are a flexible tool that many agencies can use, and we have people who serve, for example, in Senior Corps, beginning at ages 55, and many of you may have seen the viral video of grandmother Virginia McLaurin dancing with President Obama. She is a Senior Corps member, and we just inducted her granddaughter into Senior Corps. I should note that many of our Senior Corps volunteers are already engaged in service activities like financial education and fraud and scam prevention. For example, just last week, we received a story about one of our retired and senior volunteer program volunteers who himself was scammed and is now working to educate others in his community about ways that they can prevent it from happening to them. Some of you may remember that the Serve America Act of 2009 legislated competition in our retired and senior volunteer program, or our RSVP program. This competition was also designed to focus the program on new performance measures, and we were inspired by the work of this group to include financial education and preventing financial scams against the elderly as a national performance measure. We will be offering a fiscal year 2017 competition for the retired and senior volunteer program, and elder justice will be one of our priority focuses. As an agency, we are always interested in seeking innovative models to which volunteers can be engaged to help alleviate and/or solve problems. And I'd like to give you just a couple of examples. Working with our colleagues in FEMA, we established FEMA Corps, a partnership between AmeriCorps, National Civilian Community Corps, and FEMA, devoted solely to deploying their members to help with disaster recovery and response. And also in AmeriCorps, and more specifically to the work that we do here on this council, we established Justice AmeriCorps, a collaboration between CNCS and the Department of Justice to enroll lawyers and paralegals as AmeriCorps members to represent children in immigration proceedings who have crossed the U.S. borders without a parent or legal guardian. I think looking at these issues in terms of elder justice and prevention of abuse is also one of the focuses that we would like to look at in AmeriCorps with this program. Senior Corps also been in collaboration with the Social Security Administration has piloted a volunteer representative payee program engaging Senior Corps members. These pilots have had a change in leadership, but we're looking to continue the discussions with the Social Security Administration in the immediate future. Given the current demographic of older adults, 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day, we can envision a core of older adults who might be engaged to enhance support and to help eliminate some of the issues that this council strives to address. I'm highly interested and open to meeting with my agency colleagues about how we might engage senior volunteers as peers who help balance the scales of justice for older Americans. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I would ask you to just express your appreciation for and your amazement at all of the efforts of these incredible federal agencies in this space. I can recall not too long ago where we weren't aware of what other people were doing, and we certainly were not coordinating. And the fact that this council has been formed because of the Elder Justice Act, and it has enabled us to really focus on the areas that we need to focus on and where we can coordinate, has really been amazing to me. And so I want to applaud each of the agencies for their efforts and for their collaboration. Next, we're going to have panel 1, which is going to focus on cross-agency collaborations. Ben is going to join the panel. Joyce has to leave us, but again, I really thank you for coming and for presenting components from the Department of Justice, the incredible work that you all are doing. Are you going to have a representative sit in your chair?
My pleasure. Andy is going to take my place. I'm sorry I'm going to have to go for another pressing meeting, but Andy will carry on well.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. And I understand we're now going to see this incredible video while the panel gets ready, and then I will introduce the panel members. Come on up, Andy.
Why is it fraud? Because it's not true. There is no prize. There is no psychic good fortune that's going to be out there. These letters go out by the hundreds of thousands. They're mass-produced, they're bulk, they're sent out to hundreds of thousands of people, hoping they'll get a few people back that are willing to send.
Friend said, I'm kind of worried about your mom. I visited her, and she's putting cash into envelopes.
These offers are a fraud.
We've had victims call us and say, my car's being delivered today. Why don't you guys come and take a look and watch it being unloaded? We know there's no car being delivered, and by the end of the day, they'll realize there's no car being delivered. But tomorrow, they'll have renewed hope that a new car will be delivered.
The elderly in the United States are really the ones that are falling victims to a lot of these.
This is not a victimless crime.
As soon as someone has fallen for the trick once, his or her name will be added to lists of victims that are sold across the globe.
These mail fraudsters, they want to target the elderly, the vulnerable, the most needy individuals.
These criminals share information about who their victims are. They keep getting victimized over and over and over again.
See changes in one's ability to pay attention, to concentrate, and we also see changes in people's ability to make judgments about emotional trustworthiness, the credibility of something. So it's not just memory that can change with aging. We can see changes in other cognitive abilities.
It's a huge factor, and I would say it's probably the #1 factor when you come to elder abuse is that decline in cognitive ability to recognize that this is a scam.
I live on $1,163 a month. And I have given most of that to your letter.
This is financial rape.
Today, we took action under this executive order to protect America's most
An all
vulnerable.
hands on deck strategy.
The FTC has certainly seen through the years an increase in robocalls and worked to creatively solve some of this
We
problem.
know of many instances in which elderly victims were repeatedly victimized until a family member intervened.
Both my wife's parents and my parents are alive, so it's just making sure that we're talking to them, making sure that they know who their money is going to, and if you see anything that's out of the
Sort of
ordinary.
like when your parents have the birds and bees conversation with you as a child, how awkward that is. It's sort of awkward when you start having that financial conversation with your loved ones.
Continuing to work with financial institutions to help them understand that they have every ability to report suspected financial abuse to the authority.
Put into place practices that will essentially help stop the money from leaving the bank account.
The FTC developed Pass It On, which is our consumer education campaign for older adults. It's specifically designed to engage older adults to learn about consumer fraud and scams that affect them, the relevant topics that are near and dear to their hearts, but also to share that information, not just keep it, pass it on, literally, to their family and
Don't know if I could handle facing these victims in person and hearing their story. They don't have the money to pay their rent, to pay their medication, to pay for food, and they're sending money to these fraudsters. And we have to do something. This is why we do what we do.
That was great, really great. I'd like to now introduce the panelists. First, we will hear from Richard Goldberg, who is the Assistant Director for the Consumer Protection Branch at the U.S. Department of Justice, and he will actually discuss a little more in terms of the mass mailing fraud education campaign highlighted in the video. Second, we will hear from Naomi Karp, who's a senior policy analyst in the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and she'll share about partnering to develop the Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness Guide. And then Ben Belden, who is the senior advisor to the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administrator, and he will discuss the working interdisciplinary networks of guardianship stakeholders partnerships. Richard. Oh, sure.
Hi, everybody. Rich Goldberg. Sorry, I can't see everybody sitting down here, so I figured maybe I'd stand up so I could address everybody. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to talk about a coordinated effort that we ran with a number of different agencies here. So, as was said, I'm with the Consumer Protection Branch of the Department of Justice. The Consumer Protection Branch handles criminal and civil cases in a variety of different consumer protection arenas. And we try not to do one-off cases, a case here, a case there. We try and handle initiatives so that we can address an entire industry devoted to fraud. And one of our initiatives is an elder fraud initiative to try and take care of scams that are victimizing elderly Americans. And typically we see telemarketing fraud, internet fraud, everybody that the public generally thinks of as a scam. But back in 2014, we handled an investigation of a mass mailing fraud case with the Postal Inspection Service. And this was unusual in the breadth of the scheme. There were over 1 million victims, over $100 million in losses. And that's something that we in the Consumer Protection Branch hadn't seen before. And those numbers only tell part of the story because many, many of the victims were elderly or vulnerable. We had never seen a mass mailing fraud case like this before. And as was just described in the video, it wasn't simply that they were elderly or vulnerable consumers, but these were not victims who could afford even the $25 that they were putting into an envelope to send away. They were victimized over and over again, so frequently it was thousands of dollars that these consumers lost. But they frequently in their letters said, "This is my Social Security payment that I'm using to pay you. I only have $25 of the $50 you're asking for. Here's $25. As soon as I receive my Social Security payment, I'll send the other $25. And this is happening millions of times across the country. Based on this case, we figured there must be other cases like it out there. So we launched an investigation to find out, are there other circumstances? Are there other criminal organizations like this? We did it along with the Postal Inspection Service. What we found was incredibly disturbing. There was over $100 million in consumer loss a year for U.S. victims. And this wasn't just U.S. victims. This was all over the world. Consumers are being victimized by these schemes in Europe, in Asia, all over the place. And they're global schemes. Parts of the schemes are here in the U.S., part of them in other countries around the world. There was one country in particular that had a lot of P.O. boxes where victims were sending these payments. And the Postal Inspection Service looked to see how much of the mail going to this country is payment for fraud schemes. And over half of the mail going to this other country was going to fraud schemes, which was just astronomical. Obviously, the government didn't know this was going on, but this was something that was learned, and the Postal Inspection Service and the Department of Justice determined to do something about it. And we worked with the Federal Trade Commission, who's been a stalwart partner in every kind of fraud scheme we have ever pursued. And they had investigations themselves. So we learned from their actions, and we learned from the Postal Inspection Service. But we decided it wasn't going to just be those partners that we work with every day. We reached out to Andy Mao, who's been a terrific partner in the elder justice community. And he is the one who put us in touch with many of the organizations sitting here today. And we're incredibly thankful for that from Andy. And the great thing about this initiative was that it wasn't just those who have mass mailing fraud in their wheelhouse that helped with the initiative announcement, but CFPB. Naomi was a terrific partner in agreeing to work with Meals on Wheels so that mass mailing fraud would be part of an initiative with Meals on Wheels where they would hand out placemats that would go to homes across the United States and educate consumers while they're eating their meals. This is as grassroots as you can possibly get. And this is where change happens from our perspective. We worked with Ben at the Social Security, who's no longer here. But yeah, he is here, right? He is here. Yeah, so we worked with Ben. He's moving around talking. We worked with Ben at the Social Security Administration, and they put a message on their network. They're putting a message on their network that is in Social Security Administration offices, 1,200 television sets where these messages are playing, and our message on mass mailing fraud can be sent all over the United States. The Securities and Exchange Commission agreed to do blogs and investor alerts. The CFTC was terrific in doing similar alerts. The electronic press kit that the Postal Inspection Service circulated to the press so that that message could get out all over the place. And we also worked with Andy to reach out to NGOs, to non-government organizations that would get the message out to their memberships around the country and in fact around the world. So from my perspective, my limited perspective, this is exactly how a group like this should be working. And we hope that this can serve as a model where different agencies have work that they want to broadcast to the country, that maybe this could serve as a model. I'm sure there were mistakes made, but we want to use this as a model and learn from those mistakes, learn from all that we were able to accomplish in getting the word out, and build on that for future initiatives. So thank you very much for having me come and talk, but I'm really very excited that we could use so many of the people here to get our particular message out.
Thank you, Rich. Naomi, we're going to entertain questions and comments at the end of the panel.
Great. So I think I'll sit. I think I can see you all. And thank you, Acting Assistant Secretary Walker, for the opportunity to discuss the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's collaboration with the Securities and Exchange Commission on an important elder justice issue. And I want to personally thank Owen and his colleagues Owen and I worked directly and very closely on this, and it was a terrific partnership. So let me talk a little bit about the issue. Diminished financial capacity, a decline in a person's ability to manage money and financial assets to serve his or her best interests, threatens the economic security of older people and may make them more vulnerable to financial exploitation. Financial capacity is often the first type of capacity to be impacted when an older person's cognition declines. And one of the skills that declines is the judgment to detect a scam or a fraud. So that's really critical. It's not just their numeracy, their ability to balance their checkbook. It's also that judgment. And you heard Dr. Karluish on the video clip refer to that, really critical. So therefore, planning for diminished capacity is critical as people age, both to ensure that a trusted and trustworthy third party can step in if an older person no longer can make financial decisions, and to put in place safeguards against financial exploitation. The CFPB and the Securities and Exchange Commission teamed up to help people understand that planning ahead may actually help people stay in control, even if diminished capacity becomes a serious problem. In June of 2015, the two agencies released a plain language bulletin entitled Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness to encourage people to be proactive as they age and to encourage family members and friends to help. And we do have some copies of it on the table in the back, along with some of the other materials that Stacy mentioned. So afterwards, we hope you'll pick those up. It's also on our website and on the SEC's website. So both agencies had focused on the impact of diminished capacity for a number of years. The SEC, along with FINRA and another organization, published a 2008 report and a 2010 addendum highlighting practices used by financial services firms in serving senior investors. These reports focus on the importance of discussing advanced planning with clients and of training securities professionals on identifying diminished capacity. CFPB's Managing Someone Else's Money guides that Stacy mentioned before provide guidance and tips for financial caregivers, the millions of individuals managing money or property for a family member or friend who is unable to pay bills or make financial decisions. Our Money Smart for Older Adults financial education tool also addresses diminished capacity as a risk factor for elder financial exploitation, and it addresses the role of agents under a power of attorney. So what did we do? So the SEC had begun drafting an investor bulletin focusing on diminished capacity and reached out to the CFPB for input on the content. Over the course of several conversations, staff of both agencies decided that they could maximize both the quality and the reach of the document by issuing it jointly. We developed a draft that we thought would be helpful both to the older adults and to the caregiver generation. Each agency put the document through its clearance process, which you know can be a little bit cumbersome, but it actually worked pretty well. And then the staff got together and reconciled any comments that they received. So I really am going to advocate for that. Sometimes it seems harder to work together, but it's really worth it. There were few roadblocks to this joint process, and we navigated those without much difficulty. So for example, the SEC puts out what they call investor bulletins, and the CFPB issues what we call consumer advisories. Thus was born the first CFPB Consumer Advisory and Investor Bulletin, and the first SEC Investor Bulletin and Consumer Advisory. It was the same thing. Anyway, we're proud of the collaboration and the product that resulted. The 2,000-word bulletin stresses the following points. I'll just run through that briefly. So the first key point is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Organize your important documents, store them safely, and give copies to trusted loved ones. Provide your financial professionals with trusted emergency contacts so they can contact that person if they suspect something is wrong. Consider creating a durable power of attorney for finances and appoint an agent that you can trust. And speak up if you think someone is taking advantage of you or you've been the victim of fraud. Secondly, for relatives and friends of an older person, help out. Have an open conversation about financial matters sooner rather than later. And we all heard Mark from U.S. Postal Inspection Service. That can be as difficult as the birds and the bees conversation, but it's really critically important that people broach it. Help with managing finances and look out for signs of confusion and financial exploitation. If you've been named to manage money or property, understand your responsibilities and how you can protect your loved one from financial exploitation. And third, use additional resources such as various government websites for the public. The bulletin explains where to report suspected financial abuse and other types of elder abuse, and it tells consumers when and how to submit a complaint to the CFPB. Both agencies posted the bulletin on their websites and used social media to draw attention to the new resource. CFPB posted a blog and distributed an email blast to stakeholders. CFPB has incorporated information on the bulletin in numerous presentations to service providers, government agencies, caregivers, and older consumers directly, including, for example, these are just a few, presentations at the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, the Virginia Coalition for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, the National Association of Attorneys General Training for State Attorney General staff, and the World Elder Abuse Day Global Summit. We bring hard copies to display and share at conferences across the country. We've received a great deal of interest and positive feedback. In CFPB's view, one of the significant benefits of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and you've heard it from others before, is that it enables key agency staff to share expertise and to brainstorm on strategies for keeping older people safe. This bulletin on planning for diminished capacity and illness is one of many products of this synergy. You've heard a lot of others, and we're really grateful to the SEC for partnering with us, and we're grateful to the other agencies with which we've partnered as well. We look forward to continued collaboration that strengthens and amplifies our work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone, again. And after I speak, I'm going to go back up on the stage. So I'm not leaving. I'm going to go back up there. So I am so very pleased to be here today representing not only our agency, but our wonderful leader, Acting Commissioner Carolyn Colvin. And I want to start by thanking the EJCC and all of you today for all the work that you do to protect older people from abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. As public servants, it's absolutely critical that we do all we can to protect those who are potentially at risk. It has been quite an honor and a privilege to serve with you all. I'm part of the outgoing administration, so I just want to say thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for every single thing that you do for so many older people who are abused, neglected, and exploited across our country. And our agency is absolutely committed to making sure this work continues as we look forward to transition. So thank you for giving me the time today and the chance to speak about our collaboration with the Working Interdisciplinary Networks of Guardianship Stakeholders. And because that's a really long name for the rest of this presentation, we'll just call it WINGS. So the WINGS program. And I want to give a special shout out to my dear colleague at SSA, Annie Oliver, who is leading this particular project for our agency, and our really good friend from the ABA, Erica Wood, who's right there. She was really instrumental in introducing us to WINGS and solidifying our relationships with the teams across the country. So Erica, thank you so much for all of your work and your leadership. I also want to introduce you all to one of our agency's senior leaders who came here today to support us, Frank Cristato, who is our Commissioner's Senior Counselor. So Frank, thank you for your presence today and for making the time to come. So SSA is absolutely committed to supporting our most at-risk beneficiaries and responding to their needs. I know you heard from our Chief of Staff at the last council meeting, and she cited a study that showed that for every 10,000 people who come to our roles every day, unfortunately, at least 1,000 of them will be exploited financially. And I heard a story about one of our 86-year-old beneficiaries who's around my grandmother's age, well, roughly, and he received a letter saying that he had won a $3.5 million jackpot, but all he had to do was turn in his personal information to collect his winnings. So he called, really excited about the money, and he shared his personal information. So soon after that, his benefits were being diverted to a fraudulent account. We were able to issue a replacement payment for him, but this ordeal caused him 2 months of hardship. He had to actually get a bank loan to pay for his basic living expenses such as food, shelter, and medical care. And unfortunately, that happens to too many of our beneficiaries too many times. So as active members of the EJCC, we've been working really, really hard to protect our beneficiaries from this type of financial abuse and exploitation. And when our most at-risk beneficiaries aren't able to handle their own financial affairs, we'll appoint a relative, a friend, or an organization to serve as what we call a representative or a rep payee to handle their Social Security matters. And this is really important for people who lose their executive functions due to Alzheimer's or dementia. And I saw my good friend from the Alzheimer's Foundation here today, and I always talk about the challenge that Alzheimer's places on older populations. There are currently about 5.3 million people in our country who have Alzheimer's, and every 67 seconds, someone is being diagnosed with the disease. So Laura, thank you in your organization for your leadership and your work on these issues. So our rep payees are really responsible for making sure that the Social Security funds are used for the beneficiaries' basic needs, such as food, shelter, and medical care. And we know that so many of our beneficiaries don't have traditional networks of support. So rep payees help provide a stable and safe environment for people who need help with decision making. And through our work on the EJCC and in conjunction with our good partners like ACL and other agencies, we've been promoting coordination between the rep payee program and state courts that oversee guardianship. We've done this largely through the WINGS program, working with WINGS teams around the country. If you aren't familiar with WINGS, these are multidisciplinary court community partnerships consisting of advocates, mental health agencies, service providers, state courts, and individuals affected by guardianship. And these teams are so great because they really do have self-advocates that are part of the system. WINGS initiatives are really driving change, affecting the way courts and guardians practice and really improving the lives of people who need help with decision-making. In discussing elder financial abuse, a colleague of mine from the CFPB has actually said, the magnitude and complexity of this problem requires a collaborative community response. And this is something that we at SSA totally agree with. And to help foster this type of collaboration between the rep payee program and state courts that oversee guardianship, we have regional liaisons working on WINGS teams in 16 different states. Our liaisons act as the first point of contact for SSA-related payee issues, and they host regular meetings with WINGS teams to provide technical assistance and foster better coordination and collaboration, and also communication, which is really important. We're also working with WINGS stakeholders to develop a training guide that'll provide information about our programs, payee issues, fraud prevention, and the prevention of elder abuse and exploitation. This guide will also include best practices to enhance collaboration between state courts and our agency. One of the most important hallmarks of the WINGS program, in my opinion, is that groups really focus on self-determination, individual rights, person-centered planning, and the dignity of the individual. I can't overstate how valuable our partnership with WINGS and the EJCC has been over the last few years. Our collaboration has really strengthened our community partnerships and helped us to protect our most at-risk beneficiaries. And as the WINGS network expands, and I'm hoping that it will expand, we look forward to growing these partnerships around the country. And I know Erica Wood is going to be on a panel a little later, and she might mention some of this. But I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you so much as I transition out of the administration. Thank you so much for everything that you've done over the years. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to work with all of you. And I just wish you the best and look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much, panelists. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to ask if there's one burning question or comment from the members of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council for this panel. Go for it.
I guess my question is, and Ben mentioned this, how can we as a council enhance our coordination also with state and local stakeholders? I think we are at beginning stages of trying to coordinate our federal activity, but obviously the council is also responsible for coordinating with state and local stakeholders. And so I was wondering whether or not you had any thoughts, and again, we can follow up on this later, but if you had any thoughts on how we can do better in terms of collaborating with our state and local partners.
Well, I guess I'll say, and I think this holds true for CFPB, but probably a lot of the other agencies as well. We know that some of the key players in addressing these issues, whether they be physical abuse or financial exploitation or whatever, we know that some of the key players are APS and law enforcement, and then some of the other service providers and financial service providers. So I think all of us in our work, are targeting a lot of our messages and some of our tools and our products to them. We go out and do a great deal of speaking and being at conferences, and we make a lot of contacts. We take those contacts back, we build on them, we put them on our mailing list for our email blasts. And being out in the field, I think, stimulates a lot of ideas about how we can partner with people. So I think that we're always doing that. For example, the network study that Stacy mentioned really does focus really at the local community level and the regional level. So I think it's important for all of us to keep that in mind. I think you make a great point. I think we're already doing it, but I think it would behoove us in the working group and the council to probably have some more focused discussions on that.
Thank you very much.
Great. Again, let's thank this panel, and as we begin to pivot to the next panel, I'm going to give Ben a heads up that I have a question for him, but I'm going to hold it till the end. He talked about transition. It relates to transition. Okay. So could we, again, thank you, panelists. Great, incredible coordination, great outcomes. I'd like to ask our second panel to come forward, and I'm going to start introducing you as you come up. First, we will hear from Meredith Ponder with the Elder Justice Coalition. And we know of the great work of the coalition. We invited Bob Lancato, who runs the coalition or is in charge of the coalition, but he sent his able right hand, Meredith Ponder, because Bob couldn't be here today. Next, we will hear from Bill Benson, known to many, if not all of us, who is the title I have is National Policy Advisor for the National Adult Protective Services Association. Then we will hear from Paul Greenwood, Deputy District Attorney and Head of Elder Abuse Prosecution Unit in San Diego. We've heard from Paul many times. We always enjoy hearing from him. Then we will hear from Erica Wood, Assistant Director of the ABA Commission on Law and Aging. And finally, we will hear from Dan Reingold, who is President and CEO of River Spring Health in Riverdale, New York. Meredith.
All right, so thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to give testimony today. This testimony is given on behalf of the Elder Justice Coalition, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, we are a nonpartisan 3,000-member coalition dedicated to advancing elder justice policy at the federal level, whether through passage and implementation of legislation or through administrative action. We applaud the ongoing success of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, and we have been pleased to participate in several meetings over the 4 years of its existence. This testimony focuses on two areas: the accomplishments we note from the concerns we had raised 4 years ago in the first white paper we wrote, and the challenges we still face as a community and as a country. With regard to accomplishments, one area we raised was advocacy and action from within the federal government. We note the particular success of the administration in advocating for funding for the Elder Justice Act, which received first-time appropriations in fiscal year 2015. We also commend the Office of Older Americans within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has continued to do outstanding work in raising public awareness about elder financial abuse. Further, we recognize the hard work of the council itself in producing collaborations leading to items such as the creation of the Elder Justice Roadmap and the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative. The continuation of the APS Resource Center and the National Center on Elder Abuse are also important. The issuing of long-term care ombudsman regulations and CMS's binding arbitration regulations are also part of this area. And finally, through the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act, all Aging Network staff and volunteers will be receiving training on elder abuse detection and prevention, which is vital. The EJCC and the federal government at large also have worked to leverage national partners and establish and cultivate important relationships with national networks. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day and the National Center on Elder Abuse still stand out as good examples. The Administration for Community Living is to be commended for their work on identifying short-term gaps, particularly as we had recommended in the areas of data collection and of finding a federal home for adult protective services. These two steps are crucial for the network to come together to address this issue. Also, as mentioned earlier, the national guidelines published on adult protective services, which are now available, are so valuable, and we commend this work. With regard to challenges, we believe the administration could possibly do more to help advocate for the reauthorization of the Elder Justice Act. The longer this act remains unauthorized, the less likely it is that it will ever receive genuine funding. The funding it has now is a start, but it is a small percentage of the funding it was authorized to receive. Further, we do still hold that an Elder Justice Advisory Board, as called for in the Act, could bring together multidisciplinary national, local, and state partners. This would be fairly inexpensive and would be a worthwhile endeavor. We do need to continue to identify and cultivate other partners in this solution. We still have not generated a fully robust public awareness campaign as called for by numerous entities, including the EJCC itself. We still believe that working with the media and with the entertainment and advertising industries, there are definitely more resourceful ways to get a message to the American public at large about how we can all help stop elder abuse. Finally, we still need more resources from all federal agencies, from those sitting here at the table and from others, to coordinate the response to elder abuse. And in addition, a stronger alignment between APS and the law enforcement community. The Office of Adult Protective Services and ACL must continue to be strengthened. As we said in 2012, we would continue to caution the EJCC not to become too much of a Washington-only entity. Much of the work on the ground that is done in the fight against elder abuse is done at the state and local level. There are hundreds of coalitions, alliances, and committees across our nation working to prevent elder abuse, and we should be learning more about and from these local initiatives as part of the Council's work. The EJCC has done much, but it still has much more to do, and we hope it continues to do its work productively. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Bill.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Walker, and congratulations on your post. I know your plate was full already, and you have a lot more to deal with now. On behalf of the National Adult Protective Services Association, I'm honored to be here again before this council and to offer our thoughts. Before I go on, I would like to introduce Ms. Trudy Gregory, who is the new Executive Director of NAPSA, having succeeded Kathleen Quinn, who retired in August. NAPSA represents the nation's state and local adult protective services programs. As a founding member of the Elder Justice Coalition, NAPSA played a major role in the enactment of the Elder Justice Act. While much of the promise of the Elder Justice Act remains just that, a promise, the Elder Justice Coordinating Council is a tangible achievement of the EJA. Apart from law enforcement, APS is the nation's only system of state-based, statutorily authorized programs to investigate elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and to help its victims. Absent past federal leadership and resources, states evolved their own APS programs with their own definitions and standards, resulting in an uneven patchwork of services across the country. We have, however, seen noteworthy progress over the past 4 years, including the first appropriation, as has been mentioned, for elder justice activities, thus providing funding, albeit very modest amounts, for infrastructure support and demonstration projects for APS. The Administration for Community Living has brought about the development and implementation of the first ever data collection system for APS that Edwin talked about, the National Adult Maltreatment Reporting System, or NAMERS. NAMERS is a major milestone for APS and our ability to better understand the scope of and response to elder and vulnerable adult abuse. Another milestone is, of course, the new Office of Elder Justice and Adult Protective Services at ACL, as is the adoption of comprehensive recommended guidelines for states' APS programs modeled on the ones that NAPSA promulgated in 2013. And I'm glad Meredith mentioned the new regulations for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. They are brilliant, and they include a lot focused on elder abuse. Congratulations on that. APS everywhere in this country and NAPSA welcome all of these developments over these past several years. You all deserve a lot of credit. While these and others are noteworthy developments, the bottom line remains the bottom line. That is that frontline elder abuse workers, state and local APS staff, struggle daily with increased reports, heavier and more complex caseloads, staffing reductions, reduced training, and threats to current funding. Every bit of welcome attention to the topic of elder abuse, every bit of it has a little bit of a cost associated. It adds demands and expectations upon APS in every community in America. APS continues to rely upon state and local funding. Although the Elder Justice Act authorized $100 million in direct formula grant programs funding to states to support their APS systems, not one penny has yet flowed to states to support caseworkers and investigators. Fortunately, 34 states continue to spend some part of their social services block grant funding for APS, currently about $191 million, down from $214 million in 2009. In many states, the pressures on those funds has only intensified since you first met, as states shift funds from APS to other services. At this time, when elder abuse reports and caseloads are up, SSBG funding is down. Despite the importance of SSBG to APS and to its victims, SSBG remains under continuing threat. In fact, its very existence is at risk. I don't want to be melodramatic, but if we were to lose SSBG, its impact on states' APS systems would be nothing short of catastrophic. As much as we continue to advocate for Elder Justice Act appropriations to fund APS, NAPSA's top priority remains protecting SSBG. The EJA is aspirational. SSBG is real and essential. In 2012, we presented to you a white paper on APS with 10 recommendations. My written statement goes into great detail about those recommendations and the great deal of progress that has been made on each of them. I'd like to note just a couple of other items of progress. The recent VOCA rule clarifying that older victims qualify as underserved victims is a huge development. A well-designed comprehensive core training course for APS has been developed, converted to e-learning, and will become part of a NAPSA National Certificate Program. The recently reauthorized Older Americans Act requires that all Aging Network personnel be trained on elder abuse. NAPSA is developing an Elder Abuse 101 training to meet this need. The Department of Justice, has been mentioned a number of times, has created a terrific elder justice website with excellent resources for law enforcement, prosecutors, and for all of us. And NAPSA was able to improve APS practice in over a dozen states thanks to ACL for funding the National APS Resource Center. These are all important developments, but the Elder Justice Act calls for much more. It is essential that the EJA be reauthorized with the APS provisions intact and that they be fully funded. Moreover, SSBG must be preserved. And of course, vastly more research is needed into APS policies, practices, and outcomes. We know too little about what works and why, and what outcomes are being achieved for abuse victims. Thank you all very much for allowing us this opportunity.
Thank you, Bill. Paul.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. It was my privilege to be at the inaugural Elder Justice Coordinating Council back in 2012. And my written testimony does reflect how in the last 4 years we've seen a dramatic improvement in certainly the training efforts for investigators and prosecutors. But I would be derelict in my duties if I didn't also say that in the last 4 years I have seen a huge increase in the number of reports coming to my office and to other offices regarding elderly victims. And I really am honored to be the voice for local prosecutors at this venue. And I know that in the last 4 years, a lot more prosecutors around the country have finally understood the magnitude of this problem and have become trained and disciplined in seeking out these cases and actually taking them into trial. And I have to give a couple of shout-outs. Andy, I do thank you personally and publicly for the leadership you've taken in the Department of Justice. You know, in the past, there's been a great disconnect between DOJ federally and local people like myself in DA's offices. And you, through your team, have really brought Washington and the national agenda to local DAs, and I want to thank you for that. I'm sorry your boss wasn't here to hear me say that, but never mind. Hopefully somebody can tell her for me, okay? And Edwin, your administration on community living, thanks to your predecessor, Kathy, and to yourself, we've seen some tremendous benefits from the funding you've given to different programs, such as the National Center for Elder Abuse, which has been a tremendous asset for people like me. But I have to tell you, all of you, that when people describe this as an epidemic, they're not far wrong. We are seeing an avalanche of cases, and the frustration as a local prosecutor is many of these reports that I hear about never get investigated, never get prosecuted, and we've got to bridge that gap. And I think, Andy, actually your question to the previous panel is right on, because as I've been sitting here all morning, I've been thinking to myself, hearing all these tremendous programs, how can I shrink you into a mini Elder Justice Coordinating Council and bring you to San Diego? Because that's what I need. I need to be part of a much more coordinated group where, for example, and I have to refer to Agnes. I always refer to Agnes because she's my one, 95% of all my female elderly victims are called Agnes, okay? So, but Agnes, who gets ripped off by the lottery scam and loses $4,300, is that the kind of case that's going to get local attention? The local police department probably don't take a report because there's no suspect, and they're probably going to think that that's whoever the suspect is overseas. And you can't obviously get the U.S. Attorney's Office involved because for that little amount for one victim, they're not going to be looking at it. And so it comes to my office, and I would love to be able to take that Agnes case to a local task force that is already assembled involving federal agencies, county agencies, APS, and follow the money. And I think the improvements we've made over the last 4 years, we can do that. And what's stopping us from doing that? And I hope that you in your position can make this happen, because I can tell you there are a lot of local prosecutors who get frustrated because we are the ones who ultimately hear about these cases from the public, because when a crime report is not taken by the local law enforcement agency, who do they turn to? And they do turn to us, and they tell us their stories, and we just want to be able to find a solution to follow the money. And I applaud the efforts. For example, the North Dakota Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office, has done a fantastic prosecution recently on a fella from Jamaica and got 20 years on him. And he's the first that they've ever brought back to the U.S. Who was involved in this multi-marketing agencies and scamming people. But I think it was, one of you mentioned the IRS call, and there was definitely a reaction from the audience. Most of us have had that call, haven't we, from the IRS scammers. And unfortunately, many of the victims out there do get taken, and we're not in a position yet to track these crooks and hunt them down, and I wish we could. Finally, I just want to say to you, I have the great respect for one of my colleagues in the medical field, Dr. Laura Mosqueda, and I wrote to her, and she said, elder abuse affects all aspects of life: economic, social, health, community, and well-being. The time has come to fund research, education, and programs. And when I read about someone like Albert Pollard, Poland from Tennessee, who on March 22nd last year, at the age of 81, committed suicide after he discovered that he'd been the victim of one of these lottery scams, it really brings it home to me. And then on my birthday this year, March 15th, a 71-year-old gentleman, Ed Faust, committed suicide after he'd been the victim of the grandpa scam. The ripple effect of these cases is huge. And I think, and I hope, that what we've learned on the national scale, we can bring to our counties and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Erica.
Thank you. I was here 4 years ago at your inaugural meeting, and Paul, I think I followed you at that time. On a brief personal note, if I may, 4 years ago, in testifying before you, I noted that my mother was 100 years old. She's now 104. Thank you. Thank you for that. 4 years ago, I outlined a series of gaps and strategies in targeting financial exploitation by federal representative payees and state court guardians. So here's your priority number 8, fiduciary exploitation. Because both rep payees and state court guardians are fiduciaries charged with society's highest standards of trust, confidence, and care. But as you know, fiduciaries, while they stand as a bulwark against financial exploitation, sadly, some do take advantage of their position of trust to commit the very exploitation that they're to guard against. And you all know that. You asked me to report on federal agency progress in the last 4 years on combating fiduciary exploitation, and there have been some significant actions and some good beginnings, but there are also some important steps still to take. And coming toward the end here, several of my items have already been mentioned, and that's good because it shows that our coordination and how things come full circle. So first of all, fiduciaries need education and training, particularly family fiduciaries. They just don't fully understand their basic responsibilities oftentimes. It's a role they've never played before, probably will never play again. Simply put, they need to know that this money is not their own and that they are the watchdogs and the managers. Now, Social Security, the VA, and state courts have some great resources, as was mentioned earlier, many of which are online and many of which are new. And they're terrific, and if you haven't seen them, I recommend you go on the Social Security and VA websites and look at some of those. But more was needed, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as Stacy mentioned and as Naomi mentioned, stepped in with a series of 4 plain language guides specifically for non-professional fiduciaries, that is family fiduciaries. Called Managing Someone Else's Money, the guides give clear direction on the main responsibilities of the fiduciary. Okay, I'm appointed now, what am I supposed to do? What's expected of me? They also have tips on how to spot exploitation by others and avoid scams. Now, the CFPB, as mentioned earlier, has distributed almost 1 million of these guides, but that's meager compared with the need. It seems to me that council agencies, all of you, have the channels to get the word out in a big way. Financial fiduciary exploitation touches each one of these agencies, and each could benefit from this resource. Second, there's a need for federal representative payee, the system of federal representative payees to coordinate with state courts serving the very same populations. Now, you probably heard this before. It's been said by the GAO, it's been said many, many times, that essentially there are 2 fiduciary systems, one federal and one state, operating simultaneously, but not in contact. Information on exploitation and misuse of funds may be stymied as a result. Now, there are agency discussions underway about exchange of information, and that's progress. That's good progress. But exploring an amendment to the Federal Privacy Act allowing for targeting of financial exploitation could open doors. And in the meantime, though, Social Security and other federal payee programs could encourage the flow of court information to them, to you. So it may not be able to go this way, but it can go this way. Through protocols in which courts can specifically notify the agencies of exploitation by a guardian who is also a rep payee, a guardian who's also a rep payee. Now, I'm happy to say that the development of relationships by Social Security and the VA offices with state courts is already underway, as Ben has mentioned, through the appointment of designees to the state WINGS, Guardianship Reform, WINGS entity, which are ongoing court community partnerships involving some of the same kinds of coordination at the state level as we've been talking about here at the national level. You say you want to shrink it. Well, WINGS, in a sense, as far as the fiduciary side, shrinks it to the state level. And hopefully it is working and can be expanded. So there's a lot of potential there in federal participation in those court community partnerships. It's a great start. Third, we can note some good progress on fiduciary oversight. The Social Security third-party oversight of organizational payees, as Ben knows, has been expanded, including additional review tools, additional organizational payees, and now selected review of individual payees. One important facet of this third-party oversight is to look beyond just the misuse of funds to go to the related housing, safety, employment, and healthcare needs. So reviewer skills and backgrounds in disability needs and networks is really key. Now, I'm going to end on some distinct high notes briefly with 5 more examples of federal agency progress. Number 1, this one has been mentioned already several times, but it's huge, and that's the ACL data system for adult protective services data, and it includes a section on fiduciaries as perpetrators. Yes, now we're really getting somewhere, and at last, some solid data for action. Number 2, scope of guardian exploitation. I'm happy to say that the Department of Justice Office of Victims of Crime has funded a project to assess the scope of exploitation by guardians of property and come up with recommendations. And that's really going to expand our knowledge in that area because it's been a black box. So that's huge too. Number 3, court auditing tools. The State Justice Institute has funded a conservator accountability project to develop and test court appointing and tracking tools to spot exploitation by guardians. That's huge too. Number 4, guardian standards. ACL's National Center on Elder Abuse has highlighted guardian standards through its channels. That too, great start. And finally, number 5, the Rep Payee Pro Bono program. As Ben knows, Social Security has launched and is evaluating a lawyer Rep Payee Pro Bono program in Maryland. The evaluation can look hard at the training needed and the clarity of the role, and state bars can be really helpful on that. And hey, I think this is something that might just be up the alley of the American Bar Association too. So thank you very much for your leadership on really shining a light on fiduciary exploitation, which can really devastate so many lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Dan, and welcome.
Thank you, Edwin. Welcome. Thank you for convening this and for inviting me to attend. 2 months ago, Mrs. S., a 72-year-old, fell victim to a sweetheart charity scam. She sold her Brooklyn apartment, emptied her bank accounts, while waiting for the love of her life to pick her up and take her to Atlanta. Instead, she ended up in one of New York City's homeless shelters, and because she had several comorbidities, fell acutely ill, was rushed to an emergency room, and shortly thereafter, because of the training that the Weinberg Center on Elder Abuse Prevention at the Hebrew Home had done with the emergency room staff, she was transferred to the post-acute unit at the Hebrew Home, which is where the Weinberg Center is housed. Our legal team has been working with law enforcement to try to recover some of her assets, unlikely as we all know, and our social work team is working with the trauma. But the good news is that soon she'll be living in a HUD apartment that we run because HUD recognized the need for creating preferences in admissions for victims of elder abuse, something that we need to expand throughout the United States. She will be okay because of the shelter that was created by the Weinberg Center at the Hebrew Home. The Weinberg Center was created in 2005 at the nonprofit Hebrew Home, also, by the way, the location where Grandparents' Day was created in 1961, now a national holiday. And like the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, the model builds upon collaboration and partnerships. We started by filling a critical gap in service, a short-term emergency placement using an existing resource without the need for any bricks and mortar. People that had already been trained in the exigencies of geriatric care, understood what elder abuse looked like, and were already there, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The focus at the time in 2005 was on immediate access to legal services, medical and nursing care, case management, and being part of a safe and secure community. In the 12 years since we've created the first shelter in the United States, we've evolved to become a holistic model. We are a trauma-informed legal service program with 3 lawyers and 2 social workers that provides an emergency shelter for anyone who needs it, regardless of their ability to pay. We have since published multiple publications in the legal and social work communities and have provided countless forms of legal education to elder law attorneys, trust and estate attorneys, judges, court clerks, and others in the legal system. We've just begun a certificate program for guardian ad litems in New York City housing courts. All of our victims receive comprehensive geriatric care management. Our rehab staff and medical team are always on high alert to provide screening across every aspect of the services we provide. And just a note here, we've found that post-acute care has become the critical portal to identify elder abuse. And there's an opportunity here for the Medicare program to create a funding source, and I know that scares people, but the actuality is that this funding source will save Medicare many, many dollars because of recidivism that is never known to be a result of elder abuse. What we're proposing is that the Medicare, that CMS create a category of payment that is designated for elder abuse post-acute care, where the post-acute care is the result of a hospitalization occasioned by elder abuse. In our 12 years of providing shelter, we have provided 85,000 shelter days on an emergency basis. We are particularly proud of having created the Spring Alliance. The acronym stands for Shelter Partners, Regional, National, Global. And that we have created 12 shelters around the United States in communities in many other states. This has also been a great effect due to the leadership of Leading Age and the Association for Jewish Aging Services, both of whom are nonprofit long-term care provider trade associations and have given this great leadership. We are training professionals in every system to recognize elder abuse at the highest levels of the New York State court systems and to the levels of the doormen in New York City buildings who know exactly what's going on behind closed doors. We've trained our Meals on Wheels delivery people throughout New York City as well. We have created and participated in multidisciplinary teams, family justice centers, district attorney offices, bar associations, and many other community partnerships. We recently hired a public health professional who will be assembling the accumulated data that we've been collecting, and particularly to show the cost efficacy of the shelter model. The shelter model saves the Medicare system countless dollars by reducing recidivism. It saves the emergency response units countless dollars to not have to be called repeatedly for 911 calls. And the long-term care setting is a critical portal to identify and intervene in cases of elder abuse. There's been a lot of conversation recently with the implementation or proposal of new nursing home regulations, and I want to remind the group here in particular that nonprofit nursing homes and nonprofit long-term care providers are a critical partner in providing emergency shelter and critical needs for victims of elder abuse. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We are a living laboratory, and we request the Elder Justice Coordinating Council's continued support on for the shelter model, which is a workable, cost-efficient, immediate, and effective intervention in the scourge of elder abuse in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the panel for acknowledging that which we have done well, acknowledging and highlighting that which we still need to do, and for highlighting areas and innovations that we definitely need to consider. I would now like to turn to the Elder Justice Coordinating Council for any questions or comments to the panel.
So I have one question. Daniel, you mentioned that there was training for Meals on Wheels professionals in New York City. What does that consist of, and how does you go about doing that?
It's actually an unfunded mandate, Ms. Belton. It's most of the City Meals on Wheels providers are expected to provide the delivery people with training. Because we know that one of the MOs of the perpetrator is to keep the victim isolated, the difficulty is finding the victims. And so we look at all the people who might have access to getting behind those closed doors. When the City Meals on Wheels delivery person is trained, they are trained to look at some very obvious things. Once they get into the apartment, we urge them to use their senses. Smell. Does the place smell bad? Is there food in the refrigerator? Does the elder adult appear to be unkempt? And so these will be flags that can be followed up when they come back. They're not to intervene at that point, but to come back and then perhaps reach out either to the shelter or to Adult Protective Services or others. One of the other things that we just found out anecdotally, but we've been doing training with the New York City Police Department, is that whenever a law enforcement professional is called to a domestic violence case, which, as you know, are some of the most dangerous cases, if there is an older adult living in that house, there is a very significant likelihood that elder abuse is taking place as well. And we've never identified that as something that our law enforcement personnel should be aware of.
Great, thank you. Yes, Stacy.
Hi, thank you. I actually just have a comment, not a question. And first, I just want to say thank you for the terrific and very important work that each and every one of you are doing. And I think it really illustrates that the complex problem of elder financial exploitation requires complex solutions. That not one single entity, organization, or agency for that matter can solve the problem, but in fact, it really does need a coordinated effort of all of us. And I think as we are collaborating and coordinating, as that increases, I think we will find more success. I would also just like to comment about, I think what Bill raised is very important, and that is the challenges that APS is experiencing in light of the fact that, as Paul very correctly said, we're dealing with an epidemic, an avalanche of problems. I think that that's a very serious disconnect and one that clearly needs addressing.
Anyone else? I really want to thank you. I really appreciate all of your comments. We solicit your advice and counsel, but we really appreciate it as much as more than we solicited. And so we would encourage you to continue to be a partner with us in this journey. I would also say that I really want to thank each of you for what you do. It is critically important, and I really want to thank you for caring. I hear in each of your presentations your heart and your passion for the issues. I know that you know how much we need to do, but I appreciate the acknowledgement of what we have started. And we make a commitment to you to continue down this path. So join me in thanking this panel. I know our time is short. It's actually up. But I have a question for Ben. And it's not limited to Ben. It's for any other political appointee. Because clearly what you all have heard is a true commitment to this issue. And I would want you to know that the commitment has been there for a long time. It predated the passage of the Elder Justice Act. It predated the formation of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council. We have had an Elder Justice Working Group comprised of dedicated staff in the federal government, dedicated, committed to this issue, and always trying to find a way to highlight it, to get others in leadership positions to attach a degree of priority to this issue. And so as we are putting together briefing books and transition materials, the question that resides with the career staff is how do we best ensure that we interest the next crew coming in? How do we get them to understand why this is such an incredible issue and why we need them to care and to dedicate resources, time, attention to the issue? And so I don't know how many other politicals we have here who will be departing, but I encourage any of you to join in advising us.
Well, first of all, I do want to say that this is work that absolutely must continue. The need is there, and it will only grow, unfortunately. One of the things that we are doing at SSA under the leadership of our acting commissioner is making sure that we have a high-level career person who is partnered with a political appointee who is involved in all of the meetings and just all of the day-to-day activities. And I think that for this particular effort, for those of you who are politicals, I don't know if there are any in the room, but if you can match yourself with a dedicated high-level career colleague who will be there to ensure that this work continues. But we also need our outside advocates to help us to, beat the drum about why this is important and why the next administration should continue this work. And wherever I end up after this, I'll be out there with you, beating the drum, talking about how important these issues are. So we will absolutely make sure that this work does continue into the next administration in some form or fashion. But we're absolutely committed to this, absolutely.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Any other comments? Any other politicals who care to speak? We really appreciate that, and we've always known of your commitment, Ben, and so we just want your advice, your ongoing advice, and we appreciate the advice to advocates to join with us and have an inside-outside game. It's not a bad thing as we move into the next administration. Again, I hope that today has presented a sense of what we have done, what more we need to do, and the only way that we can achieve this is by doing it together. That's the advantage of an Elder Justice Coordinating Council. It has enabled us to bring a degree of energy and excitement and understanding of each other's constraints, each other's levers, and the ability to move forward in a coordinated manner. And so, again, I want to thank each of you for your commitment, your dedication, and we look forward to the next meeting, which, based on our cycle, would be about in April. But because it's a transition year, we're going to evaluate that to determine if it's the right time for us to have committed political leadership at that time. So again, I thank all of you for coming today and for participating. I thank the panelists and I thank the members of the council. Thank you. I'm thinking it over. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much, man. We wanted you from the beginning. It was just a email.
Thank you for all you do. Absolutely. Absolutely.